Have you ever had a moment in your life where time just stopped? Not from fear, but from sheer disbelief. What Min did that evening wasn't something I could have prepared for, even after all the years I'd known him. I still remember the way the light hit the window pane, casting shadows across the wooden floor, the hum of the fridge in the background. It felt like an ordinary evening until everything changed. Before we begin, tell me, from which city are you watching us tonight? I'd love to know where this story is finding its way to. Leave a comment below. Now let me take you back to the night when everything I thought I understood shifted. Min had always been polite, soft-spoken, and thoughtful. Traits he got from his father, my husband, Long. I'd known him since he was 12. At the time he was just a quiet boy with shaggy brown hair, and those intelligent deep-set eyes that always seemed to be thinking ahead of the room. But life passes fast, and children you once cooked pancakes for grow into men who look you in the eye with a confidence that can shake you a little. Long and I had been married for 37 years. A long winding journey of loyalty, occasional disappointments, unspoken forgiveness, and countless ordinary days. Ours was not a marriage of passion, but of persistence. Long was a provider, not an emotional man. He was never cruel, just distant. Somewhere between raising a child and maintaining a home, we both forgot what tenderness felt like. That summer, Long had planned a fishing trip up north, just a week, a few old buddies from his youth, some whiskey, and a lake he hadn't visited in decades. I encouraged him to go, told him it would be good for him, and maybe, if I'm honest, I needed the quiet too. Min came by the day Long left just to check in on me. I didn't expect him to. He wasn't living with us. He had his own place in town, but he said he just wanted to make sure the house didn't feel too empty. He had grown into a striking man. At 42, he still carried a strong presence, broad shoulders, a slow and steady voice, and a kind of protective nature that didn't feel forced, just natural. He helped me move a few boxes from the attic, repaired a leaky faucet, and stayed for dinner. We ate on the back porch, the air warm and still, with the sounds of summer insects humming all around us. He asked me questions about my garden, about a book I'd been reading, and laughed when I told him I was secretly watching old crime dramas when Long wasn't around. There was something about the way he listened that evening, as if every word I said was worthy of attention. I wasn't used to that anymore. Not in the day-to-day routine I had grown accustomed to. After dinner, I offered him coffee, and we sat in the living room while the sky outside shifted into twilight. I noticed his gaze lingered when I reached for a book on the table. Just a second too long. "You look different," he said, almost absently, more relaxed, softer. I felt a blush rise to my cheeks, ridiculous at my age, but there it was. "Maybe I am," I replied, smiling nervously. "A few quiet days can do that." The next day he returned, said he had the afternoon free, and offered to take me into town for lunch. I didn't say no. I didn't want to. We sat in a quiet booth by the window at a little diner, the kind of place where the waitress calls you Han, and the iced tea never stops flowing. He asked me about the early days of my marriage, and I found myself talking more than I expected about dreams I once had, the places I never visited, the things I used to imagine before practicality set in. "I think," he said, staring down into his cup, "you gave up more than you had to." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You deserved more than just being someone's support system. You deserve someone to see you, to ask how you're doing." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't anger or accusation in his voice. It was empathy and something deeper I couldn't quite place. That night he lingered longer than usual. We played an old vinyl record I hadn't touched in years. The music drifted softly through the house as we talked in the warm glow of the floor lamp. He sat closer to me than he had before. Not inappropriate, just closer. There was a pause in our conversation, one of those natural silences that doesn't feel awkward, just present. I looked over at him, and for a moment our eyes locked. He reached out slowly, carefully, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so tender, so intimate that my breath caught. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. I just froze. Not out of fear, but because in that moment I didn't feel like a mother-in-law or a wife or a woman in her 60s. I felt seen. The air between us shifted. The room, once filled with harmless familiarity, now thrummed with something unspoken. I could feel it, like the low vibration of thunder before a storm. He didn't say anything else that night. Just stood up, kissed me lightly on the top of my head, the way he used to when he was younger, and left. I sat there long after he was gone, heart racing, thoughts spinning. Something had awakened that I hadn't felt in decades, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. But I knew deep in my bones that everything was about to change. The next morning, I woke with a strange weight on my chest. It wasn't anxiety exactly, more like anticipation tangled with confusion. I made my tea, sat at the kitchen table like I always did, but the usual rhythm of my day was off. I kept replaying the moment from last night. Min's fingers brushing my hair aside, the warmth in his eyes, the silence that followed. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. Not about him. Not about anyone outside of my husband. But emotions don't care about logic. They creep in when you're unguarded. And after years of quiet loneliness inside a marriage that no longer reached me, I had let my guard down. By the time late afternoon rolled in, I had just settled in the living room halfway through folding laundry when I heard a knock at the front door. I didn't have to guess. I already knew it was him. When I opened the door, Min stood there with a paper bag in one hand and that same unreadable calm on his face. "I brought dinner," he said. "Didn't think you'd argue." I almost laughed. "You're right. I won't." He moved around the kitchen like he had always belonged there, pulling plates from the cabinet, setting the table. There was something comforting about his quiet confidence, the way he didn't ask for permission yet never crossed a line. Dinner passed like it had the night before. Easy conversation, a few laughs. I could feel him watching me at moments, but not in a way that made me uncomfortable. Quite the opposite. Afterward, we sat in the living room again, the house dimly lit, the night air floating in through a cracked window. We talked about memories, childhood things, old family vacations, the first time he caught a fish with long. And then quietly he said something that made the whole world narrow around us. "You used to hold my hand when I was scared." I looked at him. "Of course I did. You were just a boy." "I'm not anymore," he said. The space between us became charged again. Not inappropriate, not demanding, but charged. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I didn't understand. I cleared my throat, searching for something to break the tension. "You're right," I said. "You're not. You've grown into a good man." He held my gaze. "A man who still sees you even when no one else does." My breath caught. There it was again. That deep awareness in his voice. That ability to peel back the surface of things and speak right into the soft places I carefully hidden away for years. "You should go," I whispered, but not because I meant it. I think I said it to myself more than him. He stood, took a slow step forward, and gently reached out, offering his hand. I looked down at it, heart pounding, then back up at him. "Min, I'm not asking for anything you don't want," he said. "But you deserve to feel alive, even if just for a moment." His voice was low, careful. He didn't touch me beyond that extended hand. He gave me the space to choose, and that's what undid me. I reached out and placed my hand in his. It was warm, steady, familiar, and completely foreign at the same time. He didn't pull me in. He didn't move closer. He simply held my hand there between us. And in that silence, something wordless passed between us. Something neither of us could put into words. Eventually, he let go, nodded softly, and left. The door closed behind him. I stood there in the hallway for what felt like an eternity, heart still in my throat, hand tingling from his touch. I knew nothing had happened, and yet everything had changed. Over the next few days, I went through the motions, grocery runs, watering the plants, answering calls from a few friends. But my thoughts drifted. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of that moment, that hand in mine, that look in his eyes. Long called once to check in, said the trip was going well. He caught some base, played poker, and hadn't checked his email in days. I told him everything was fine here, and it was, except for the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about someone who wasn't supposed to matter that way. The next time Min came over, he brought me a book. "I saw this and thought of you," he said, handing it to me without fanfare. Said the main character reminded me of someone I know. I turned it over in my hands. A novel about a woman rediscovering her strength after years of invisibility. My chest tightened. He didn't stay long that evening, just long enough for a cup of tea and a few quiet words. But as he left, he turned to me at the door. "Lon, I'm not trying to confuse you," he said. "I just want you to remember that you're still allowed to be wanted." He walked off into the night, and I stood at the threshold of something I hadn't felt in decades, the possibility of being truly seen. Something was building, not just between us but within me. The next day began like any other, but nothing about me felt the same. There was a low hum beneath everything I did. Brushing my hair, slicing a pear for breakfast, hearing the birds outside my window. I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Conflicted but undeniably awake. I'd sat with his words all night. You're still allowed to be wanted. No one had said anything like that to me in years, not even my husband, especially not him. When Long and I were younger, there had been affection, a sense of care, but it faded quietly over the years, not from a single fight or betrayal, but from routine and silence. The kind of silence that doesn't make noise, but swells in the gaps of daily life. I hadn't realized how much I missed being noticed until someone finally did. Minh didn't call that morning. He didn't text, and yet I found myself glancing at my phone, checking the front window, listening for the low rumble of his car in the driveway. By mid-afternoon I couldn't sit still. I took a walk around the neighborhood, past the bakery I liked, and wandered through the park where Minh used to ride his bike as a boy. Everything around me suddenly carried a memory of him. Not the child, but the man. His voice, his quiet confidence, the way he looked at me like I was more than just someone's wife or mother. When I got back home, there was a small envelope slid beneath the door. My heart stuttered the moment I saw my name written in his handwriting. Inside was a note, just a few lines. There's a part of you I think you've forgotten. If you trust me, meet me at the lake house. No pressure, just you and me. I'll be there until sunset. The lake house was about 20 minutes outside town. A quiet, modest cabin Long's parents had left us. We barely used it anymore. I hadn't been in nearly 3 years. I stared at the note for a long time. Then I went to my room and stood in front of the mirror. I studied myself, the faint lines around my eyes, the soft curve of my neck, the silver threads in my dark hair. I wasn't the girl I once was, but I also wasn't invisible. Not to him. I don't know exactly what made me grab my keys and go. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the part of me that remembered what it was like to feel something unexpected. Something unscripted. The drive was quiet, the kind of winding back road that makes you think too much. I pulled up slowly, parking near the edge of the gravel path. The lake shimmered under the late afternoon sun, golden light stretching across its calm surface. The cabin stood still, almost as if it were waiting for me. He was sitting on the steps, elbows resting on his knees, staring out at the water. When he turned and saw me, he smiled. Not big, not smug, just honest. You came, he said. I nodded. You left me a note. He stood and walked toward me slowly. I didn't know if you would. I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't. I looked past him at the lake. I almost didn't. But you did, he said gently. You're here. He stepped aside and gestured toward the porch. I brought some things. I thought maybe you'd want to sit by the water for a while. Inside the cabin, everything was clean and quiet. The air held a scent of pine and old wood. On the table was a small spread, fruit, cheese, a bottle of white wine already uncorked. We sat on 2 old chairs by the edge of the deck overlooking the lake. For a while we didn't speak, just listened to the sounds of birds calling across the water, the occasional rustle of wind in the trees. Finally he turned to me. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted to be with you somewhere without distractions. Minh, I started, but he interrupted softly. I know this is complicated. I know what this looks like. But I'm not here to push you or ruin anything. I just want you to know how I feel. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again, voice low. I felt this way for a while. Not just attraction, it's more than that. It's how you carry yourself, how you see people, how you've always made space for others, even when no one made space for you. His words were disarming. They didn't feel like a performance. There was no pressure in them, just quiet conviction. You make me feel like I can breathe, he said. I swallowed hard. My chest felt tight. I hadn't expected him to say that. I hadn't expected to feel what I was feeling either. A strange kind of grief and hope twisted together. I'm old enough to be your. He looked at me quickly. You're not old. You're beautiful and wise and steady in a way that makes me feel safe. Silence wrapped around us again, broken only by the distant lap of water. I'm not used to being seen, I whispered. Not really. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything, he said. Just be here with me. That's all I want. He reached out, this time slower than ever, and brushed his fingertips against the back of my hand. It was nothing more than a touch, but it made my skin feel like it was waking up from a long sleep. I didn't move. He sat back. I brought you here because I wanted to give you a space where there's no history, no expectations, just us as we are now. As the sun dipped lower, I felt something inside me shift. A small door opening. A memory of the woman I used to be. Before motherhood, before years of being second to someone else's needs. I turned my hand over and let my fingers wrap around his. Not a declaration, not a promise, just a moment. But sometimes a moment is all it takes to change everything. And as we sat there watching the sky turn gold and violet over the water, I let myself feel it fully, the quiet wonder of being chosen, not out of obligation, but because someone simply wanted to. That night I couldn't sleep. After I returned from the lake house, the air in my bedroom felt different. The quiet wasn't the same anymore. It was charged with everything unspoken, every glance, every word Minh had shared. I lay under the ceiling fan, eyes fixed on the shadows shifting across the walls, and felt the pull of something I hadn't allowed myself in a long, long time. Desire, not just for touch or romance but for attention, for understanding, for emotional intimacy. It wasn't the physical caress I kept in. It was the way he looked at me like I was still a woman worth being known. The next morning I busied myself with chores. I polished the silverware I never used, rearranged books on shelves that hadn't been touched in years. But no matter how much I distracted myself, thoughts of him crept in, warm and persistent. I hadn't told Long any of it. He was due back the following day, and I was already rehearsing the motions. What I'd say, how I'd look, the conversations we'd avoid, like always. The safety of routine waited on the other side of his return, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down at the life I used to think was enough. Just before dinner, Minh came again. He didn't knock. He just waited outside until I opened the door. He looked tired, not from lack of sleep but from holding something in. I didn't say anything at first, just stepped aside and let him in. We stood in the middle of the kitchen, the smell of baked chicken still warm in the air. "I know he's coming back tomorrow," he said quietly. I nodded. "I know this ends in a way, but I needed to see you one more time. Not to convince you of anything, just to say something I didn't say before." I swallowed. "Okay." He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "I didn't fall for you because I was lonely. I didn't come here looking for something casual or complicated. I came because you were already in my heart long before I ever realized it." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, from the sheer intensity of what he was offering. The honesty, the bravery. "You've made me feel more human in the last few days than I have in years," I whispered. He nodded. "That's all I needed to know. That it mattered to you too." He started to turn, ready to leave, but I stopped him. "Minh." He paused, looking back. "I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if anything can happen beyond this, but I need you to know. I felt it too. Every word you said, every touch, I wasn't just imagining it." He took a slow breath as if letting go of something heavy. "Then that's enough for me," he said. Even if this is where the story pauses, he didn't stay. He didn't push. He just walked away, giving me the space he promised from the beginning. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. I didn't address it to Long, not to Minh, just to me. I wrote about the woman I had become, strong, quiet, dependable, and the one I used to be, curious, romantic, hopeful. I told myself the truth, that both women deserved to live inside the same body, that it was okay to want more, to feel again, even at 67. When Long returned the next day, the house resumed its rhythm. Coffee in the morning, news on the television, dinner at 6. But I had changed. I didn't bring up Minh. He didn't ask. Life resumed, but something quiet had taken root inside me. Weeks passed, then months. Minh stopped coming around for a while. I didn't blame him. We both needed space, but the ache of his absence reminded me I wasn't numb anymore. I was awake. One morning, long after the leaves had turned gold, and the air began to chill, I saw his car in the parking lot at the grocery store. Our eyes met across the rows of apples and oranges. He smiled, small, familiar, filled with a silent understanding. And in that smile I knew something. Even if our story never returned to that quiet lake house, it had already changed me. I'd felt something real, something sacred, and no one could take that away. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't reckless. It was human. It was the rediscovery of my own worth through someone else's eyes. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's